Year-old animals.
Okay. Anyway, Joan Embry is here tonight.
And she's now 32.
That's right. Joan is an animal handler and a trainer. And you really think you're fooling everybody, don't you?
No.
The Great American Illusion. Picture this. It's 1975. The night is quiet across the suburbs of the United States.
About 9 years. About 9 years.
Right, yeah. Several plus several will be about 9.
You said 7 or 8.
No, I said... No, I didn't.
Millions of hard-working Americans are tucked into bed, turning off their bedside lamps, and tuning their television sets to NBC for a nightly ritual.
You ask him to come out and say something, and he's out there.
Right.
So that, and then while they were introducing me, I just thought of that, and I said, I believe I'll try this. And I did, and people laughed, embarrassed.
The familiar, comforting theme music plays, the iconic multicolored curtains part, and there stands Johnny Carson, the undisputed king of late-night television.
Seeing those animals tonight, it's sort of...
He delivers his monologue, the audience roars, and then, the real magic begins. Johnny walks over to his famous wooden desk, adjusts his tie, and looks at his guest list. Moments later, a guest stumbles onto the set. His tie is visibly crooked, his collar is completely open, his jacket looks like it was picked up off a closet floor, and his eyes are heavily drooping.
I remember my dad was telling us a story about one of those days when, to this day, I think he made it up, but he did.
Every single time this man opens his mouth, a wave of beautifully timed, perfectly slurred chaos hits the microphone. The studio audience isn't just chuckling, they are in absolute, tearful hysterics.
Say something that you're not supposed to say, and you make it dirty. Well, I don't really make it dirty.
I don't know what you're squawking about. I did the warm-up here tonight.
Johnny Carson himself is completely losing control.
But I thank you for joining us in the sketch, and I hope you have a real happy marriage. Really, be real happy. You're a very, very lovely girl.
Could you...
He is leaning forward on his desk, wiping actual tears of laughter from his eyes, buried face-first in his hands because he cannot cope with the sheer unpredictability of the man sitting next to him on the couch. For decades, late-night television in the United States lived by one strict, unspoken golden rule: anything can happen on live TV.
Well, I finally found a perfect girl I could not ask for.
And throughout the late 1960s, the entire 1970s, and the early 1980s, nothing captivated the American television public quite like the iconic lovable drunk archetype.
Is that a fact?
It was the undisputed golden age of the comedy lush.
It's Wednesday, Dean. Yeah.
This is it.
Characters who seemed to have stumbled straight out of a high-end Hollywood cocktail lounge or a local neighborhood saloon walked onto the most watched stage in the country, bringing an unpredictable, dangerous energy that kept viewers glued to their screens.
Do you see each other socially often?
Why?
We don't see any...
Why should I see
Well,
him?
you don't see anybody socially. I never see you out. Where do you go?
Well, I got 3 buttons on my car.
But behind the roaring laughter of the studio audience, behind the clinking glasses sitting on Johnny's desk, and behind the seemingly out-of-control guests who looked like they couldn't even remember their own names, lay a fascinating, complex web of brilliant calculated performances, career-saving deceptions, and rare moments of genuine, unscripted reality that late-night television would never experience again.
And make them love you. But this is the truth. You are the best entertainer on TV.
Because the funniest drunk moments in television history were almost never what they seemed on the surface.
That scene at Wimbledon?
Yeah, you were? Oh, yes, you were.
They came out at Wimbledon and they said producers of a movie called Players, starring Dino Martin and Ally McGraw, and they used all of the spectators at Wimbledon and they had a scene there. So we're all.
Today, we are stripping away the studio smoke of old Hollywood. We are unlocking the legendary NBC Burbank archives and breaking down the absolute masterclasses in physical comedy, the shocking backstage secrets that the networks kept hidden for decades, and the exact cultural moment this iconic era vanished from American television forever.
And all he had to say was Buster, and Buster would come look at the watch and go to bed. So,
The man who fooled America sober. To understand exactly how deep this cultural illusion went, we have to look closely at a man who became an absolute titan of late-night comedy without ever playing a traditional character.
That's something. Well, that was George, too, though. We shouldn't mention that because George has done pretty well with that other thing.
A big shop, too.
But Jack is great.
We have to look at a man named Foster Brooks. In the early 1970s, Brooks became an absolute overnight sensation the moment he walked onto the stage of The Tonight Show. To the public, he was known nationwide by one definitive title, the Lovable Lush.
you ask him to come out and say something, and he's out there.
Right.
So that, and then while they were introducing me, I just thought of that, and I said, I believe I'll try this, and I did, and people laughed embarrassingly at me. You know, they were laughing like this and looking like they were, you know, and, oh, my Lord. I'd hear remarks like, that man will never get it.
He had an uncanny, almost frightening ability to perform. He could slur a sentence so perfectly that you could barely understand the words, yet the comedic punchline landed with the precision of a laser.
I guess it's because everybody else squeaks and they figure I won't complain too much.
He could catch his physical balance with such terrifying, sudden precision just as he was about to fall over the couch, and he could mimic the slow, heavy-lidded, unfocused gaze of someone who had just consumed an entire bar's inventory. The American audience instantly fell in love with him. When Foster Brooks sat on Johnny's couch, he didn't sit politely. He would lean forward aggressively, invading Johnny's personal space, slurring his words directly into Carson's face while Johnny reacted with a mix of mock terror and genuine delight. He played the character with such absolute, unyielding realism that viewers at home were frequently shocked. NBC's switchboards would light up with phone calls, and letters would pour into the studio from concerned citizens wondering how a major television network could allow someone in that severe condition to walk out onto a live broadcast. But behind the scenes, hidden in the green rooms of NBC, there was a staggering truth that the American public simply refused to believe, no matter how many times it was stated. Foster Brooks was completely, undeniably, 100% sober. The reality of the situation is one of Hollywood's greatest ironies. In 1964, long before he ever put on a tuxedo to step out onto Johnny Carson's stage, Foster Brooks walked away from alcohol forever because of a simple, casual $10 bet. For over 30 years, spanning the absolute peak of his fame, the entire duration of his late-night career, and his status as America's favorite drunk, he never touched a single drop of liquor. While audiences envisioned him partying with the Hollywood elite until the sun came up, Brooks was backstage surviving entirely on plain water and black coffee. It became so intense that his own wife and his daughter, Scotty Brooks, had to routinely defend his honor on the streets, actively convincing angry fans that he was not destroying his health for the sake of show business, but was rather a devoted family man who just happened to be a genius actor. The act wasn't a manifestation of a personal vice, it was a miraculous masterclass in physical acting born out of pure, raw economic desperation. Long before his big break, Brooks was a struggling local radio and television broadcaster working in Buffalo and Rochester, New York. Hoping to make it big, he packed up his things and moved his massive family of a wife and kids out to Los Angeles to try his hand at acting. But Hollywood is a brutal town. For years, he was completely ignored. He was an aging, forgotten actor in a city that constantly chewed up and spat out young talent. To keep a roof over his family's head and put food on the table, Brooks spent years working grueling, low-paying odd jobs. He delivered heavy telephone books door to door, pulled seasonal shifts at the United States Post Office during the winter rush, and worked late nights as a security guard at Dodger Stadium just to make enough money to pay rent. Then came a fateful day in 1969. A game show host named Dennis James handed Brooks a $50 bill to stand up and tell a few jokes at a charity golf tournament. As he was walking up to the microphone, looking out at the crowd, Brooks suddenly realized that his standard, clean-cut broadcasting material simply wasn't going to cut it. In a split second of pure panic and creative desperation, he made a decision that changed his life forever. He decided to fake it. He intentionally buckled his knees, let his jaw drop, loosened his tie, and delivered his entire comedy routine as if he had just stumbled out of a local tavern. The crowd didn't just laugh, they erupted. The sheer shock value of a man appearing completely incapacitated, yet delivering brilliant comedic timing, was something they had never seen before. Sitting in the audience that day was the legendary singer Perry Como. Como was so transfixed by the sheer brilliance and uniqueness of the performance that he immediately made a decision. He hired Brooks on the spot to be his opening act for his prestigious Las Vegas residency. When the executives at the Las Vegas Hilton Hotel balked at the idea of putting an unknown, older man on their famous stage, Perry Como didn't back down. He gave the casino billionaires a harsh ultimatum: if Foster Brooks doesn't play, I walk out right now. Como literally put his own multi-million-dollar contract on the line for a man who, just months prior, was directing traffic and checking tickets at a baseball stadium. When Como finally introduced Brooks to Johnny Carson, an iconic piece of American television history was permanently solidified. Johnny Carson trusted Brooks implicitly. Carson was a notorious perfectionist who fiercely guarded the comedic timing of his show, but he knew that while Brooks looked like an unpredictable liability on camera, his mind was as sharp as a razor, and his timing was flawless. Consider one of Brooks' finest routines ever delivered on the show, his legendary drunk pilot bit. He walked onto the set, sat next to Johnny, and announced that he was a commercial airline pilot representing the airline industry. With a straight face, while swaying slightly in his chair, he began to explain the safety features of a modern aircraft. "Johnny," he slurred, blinking heavily, "people worry about flying, but there's no reason to be scared. The engines are perfectly safe. In fact, just last week, I was flying at 30,000 feet, and one of my engines completely quit." Johnny, playing the perfect, concerned straight man, leaned in and asked, "My goodness, Foster, what did you do?" Brooks paused, stared blankly at the audience, let his head drop slightly, and slurred, "Nothing, we just stayed up there until the other one quit, too." The studio audience collapsed into laughter. The brilliance lay in his physical commitment. He would take a glass of water from Johnny's desk, raise it to his mouth, miss his lips entirely on the first attempt, spill a few drops down his chin, and then look genuinely surprised by gravity. It was high-wire comedic acting without a safety net, performed by a man who went home every night completely sober to his family. The juice inside the glass. While Foster Brooks was a sober actor masterfully playing a fictional character, there was another titan of 20th century entertainment who took the drunk persona and turned it into a multi-million-dollar international lifestyle brand. We are talking about the ultimate king of cool, Dean Martin. Whenever Dean Martin appeared on The Tonight Show, the energy in the room shifted instantly. He didn't just walk onto the set, he slid onto the couch with an effortless, casual grace that defined old Hollywood glamour. He would lean back into the cushions, slur his words with a charming, lazy grin, dangle a lit cigarette between his fingers, and hold a lowball glass filled with a beautiful amber liquid. Martin delivered iconic, legendary routines on Johnny's couch that felt entirely spontaneous. His most famous was the hangnail routine. He sat there, looking intensely at his thumb, and began to weave an incredibly complex, overly dramatic medical tragedy about a tiny piece of torn skin on his finger. He slurred his words so heavily, pausing to look longingly at his drink, that he made a minor skin irritation sound like a life-threatening emergency. Johnny Carson was rolling on his desk, completely unable to contain himself. Martin cultivated the exact image the public wanted, a legendary playboy who spent his entire life floating effortlessly from a high-stakes casino bar in Las Vegas straight to a television studio in Burbank without ever sobering up. But once again, the American public was looking at a beautifully engineered, highly sophisticated illusion. The truth behind Dean Martin's famous on-stage glass was one of the entertainment industry's best-kept secrets. The glass was almost never filled with scotch, whiskey, or bourbon. It was filled with 100% pure apple juice. Sometimes, if the studio lighting made the apple juice look too bright, the stage managers would swap it out for a glass of weak, watered-down black tea. In reality, Dean Martin was not the out-of-control, hard-drinking playboy that his stage persona suggested. He was a fiercely disciplined, incredibly professional entertainer. He was a man who loved playing golf early in the morning, went to bed at a reasonable hour whenever he wasn't performing, and memorized his song lyrics and comedy material with meticulous care. So why did he spend decades pretending to be completely intoxicated in front of millions of television viewers? The answer is a brilliant piece of psychological showmanship and career strategy. Dean Martin discovered very early in his career, during his days performing in smoky nightclubs alongside Jerry Lewis, that the drunk playboy persona gave him a massive, impenetrable creative shield. Live television and live stage shows are incredibly high-pressure environments. If Martin accidentally dropped a line of dialogue, if he missed a musical cue from the band, or if a joke completely bombed and failed to get a laugh, he didn't have to panic. He didn't look like a failure. Instead, he could simply stop, look down at his glass, wink knowingly at the audience, slur a quick, improvised ad-lib about having one too many drinks, and instantly turn a mistake into the biggest laugh of the night. The persona turned potential professional disasters into pure comedy gold. It masked his intense, lifelong stage anxiety and made him instantly relatable to an ordinary American audience that wanted to escape the rigid, sober pressures of their daily working lives. The illusion was so thoroughly convincing that Johnny Carson himself decided to famously break the fourth wall during an unforgettable broadcast in August of 1978. Dean Martin was sitting on the couch, right in the middle of a relaxed, heavily slurred story about his travels. As Dean raised his glass to take another sip, Johnny suddenly reached across his desk, snatched the glass right out of Martin's hand, and pulled it toward himself. The studio audience went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. People thought Johnny was about to stage an intervention on live national television. Johnny looked at the amber liquid, raised the glass to his lips, and took a massive, unmistakable sip. Dean Martin watched him with a sly, knowing smirk. Johnny smacked his lips, stared directly into the camera lens with a look of profound, deadpan disappointment, and let out a sigh. He revealed the truth to millions of homes across the United States without saying a single word. The ultimate king of the Hollywood party scene was drinking fruit juice. But the incredible thing about the American public was that this revelation didn't ruin the magic at all. It didn't break the spell. Instead, it only heightened the public's profound appreciation for just how masterfully skilled Dean Martin was at executing the physical and vocal bit. He was so good at acting drunk that even when people knew it was apple juice, they still chose to believe the illusion. When the chaos was real. However, late-night television in the 1970s wasn't entirely a landscape of controlled, sober performances and hidden glasses of juice. Because every once in a while, the chaos unfolding on Johnny Carson's stage wasn't an act designed by a clever comedian. Every once in a while, the dynamic was completely, undeniably, and terrifyingly real. One cannot discuss the history of late-night comedy without focusing heavily on the legendary broadcast of 1975 featuring a historic couch lineup, the iconic Bob Hope, the smooth Dean Martin, and a veteran, self-deprecating comedian named George Gobel. Gobel was a highly respected comic, but on this particular evening, he found himself booked as the final guest, meaning he had to walk out and sit down on the couch right next to two of the absolute biggest, most intimidating entertainment icons on the planet. By the time Gobel took his seat, Bob Hope and Dean Martin had been dominating the conversation for 20 minutes. The studio audience was completely focused on them. Gobel sat there, looking smaller and smaller, completely sandwiched between these two massive giants of old Hollywood star power. Sensing that the segment was completely slipping away from him and that he was about to be entirely edited out of the cultural conversation, Gobel took a deep breath. He leaned forward, bypassed Johnny entirely, looked directly into the lens of the main television camera, and delivered a line that instantly etched itself into the history books of American comedy. Did you ever feel like the world was a tuxedo, and you were a pair of brown shoes? The studio audience erupted into a standing ovation of laughter. But it is what happened immediately after that line that entered the permanent lore of The Tonight Show. Dean Martin, who was fully committed to his loose, chaotic, drink-holding persona that night, looked at Gobel, smiled, and then casually leaned over with his lit cigarette. Right there, on live national television, Dean Martin calmly began to flick his glowing cigarette ashes straight into George Gobel's freshly poured, untouched drink sitting on the table. The audience gasped and laughed all at once. Gobel didn't flinch, he didn't break character, and he didn't get angry. He simply stared down at his ruined beverage with a look of profound resignation, looked back at Johnny Carson, and allowed the unscripted physical comedy to play out to its natural, hilarious conclusion. It was live television magic at its absolute finest, completely unrehearsed, intensely collaborative, and entirely flawless. But then, there were the rare, heavy nights where the real-life vices of Hollywood crashed straight through the carefully constructed illusions of the network, bringing a sense of real danger to the set. On April 8, 1977, the studio lights inside NBC Burbank came up right on schedule. The live studio orchestra began to play the famous, booming opening theme song composed by Paul Anka. Johnny's longtime sidekick and announcer, Ed McMahon, stepped up to his designated microphone to deliver the most famous introduction in the history of worldwide media, "Here's Johnny." Except, on this specific night, the legendary introduction sounded incredibly, noticeably strange. Ed's usually booming, crisp, professional voice was slightly slurred and strangely delayed. His words stumbled over one another, and his trademark hearty laughter echoed across the quiet studio a full second too late, completely out of sync with the band's musical cues. When Johnny Carson walked out from behind the curtain, took his place at the center of the stage, and looked over at his longtime friend and sidekick at the announcer's desk, he immediately realized what was happening. Unlike Foster Brooks or Dean Martin, Ed McMahon was not putting on a brilliant masterclass in physical theater that afternoon. He wasn't drinking apple juice. The Carson Entertainment Group and the Carson estate would later openly concede in historical retrospectives that Ed McMahon had returned from an incredibly long, celebratory, 3-hour Hollywood business lunch visibly, heavily, and genuinely inebriated on live television. The tension behind the scenes was immense. Stage managers were panicking. In the modern era of television, a network would instantly cut to an unexpected commercial break, pull the announcer off the set, or use digital delays to cover up the mistake. But Johnny Carson was a product of the old school of live entertainment. He understood that the audience at home wasn't stupid. They could see exactly what was happening. So, instead of cutting away, instead of getting angry, or instead of firing his sidekick backstage, Carson made the executive decision to lean heavily into the reality of the situation. He turned Ed's obvious intoxication into the ultimate running joke of the entire night. He spent the monologue firing witty, unscripted jabs directly at Ed's desk. When Ed would offer a slow, delayed reaction, Johnny would pause, look at the camera with a raised eyebrow, and say, "Looks like Ed had the soup for lunch today." Carson used his unmatched, lightning-fast wit to protect his best friend from a potential career-ending public scandal while simultaneously giving the American public a rare, thrilling, and completely unvarnished look at authentic live television vulnerability. It became one of the most talked-about episodes of the decade because it was real. The death of the lovable lush. For over 15 years, these legendary drunk routines and high-wire comedic acts reigned completely supreme over the late-night landscape of the United States. They generated the highest ratings NBC had ever seen, brought in millions of dollars in advertising revenue, and completely defined the loose, late-night, high-society party atmosphere of the entire 1970s era. But as the calendar pages slowly turned into the late 1980s, the cultural, social, and political landscape of the United States underwent a profound, permanent, and institutional shift. The collective American perspective on alcohol, vice, and public health was changing rapidly. With a massive, growing national awareness around the real-world tragedies and medical devastation of chronic alcoholism and the historic, powerful rise of grassroots public advocacy groups like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the long-standing entertainment archetype of the lovable lush suddenly stopped being funny to the general public. What had once felt like harmless, lighthearted, sophisticated escapism now felt deeply uncomfortable, socially irresponsible, and profoundly out of touch with reality. Television network executives, deeply fearful of public boycotts and changing corporate advertising standards, began quietly but aggressively phasing out the drunk comedy trope across all programming. Late-night talk shows, sitcoms, and variety hours were wiped clean of the character who slurred his way through a conversation for cheap laughs. For the legendary performers who had spent an entire lifetime perfecting the intricate physical art of the act, this massive cultural pivot brought a deeply poignant, melancholy end to an incredible era. Deanna Martin, the devoted daughter of Dean Martin, would later write movingly about the final years of her father's career. She noted that as her father began to age biologically, continuing the famous, suave drunk routine became increasingly difficult and uncomfortable for him and his fans. The changing American audience no longer see a sharp, effortlessly cool king of Hollywood playing a clever character with a glass of apple juice. Instead, they began to worry with deep anxiety that the physical vulnerability they were seeing on stage was real aging and real illness. The laughter turned into pity, leading directly to the permanent retirement of old Hollywood's most successful comedic persona. But for Foster Brooks, the absolute realism of his legendary performance became his ultimate professional curse. He had played the character of the lovable drunk so flawlessly, with such absolute vocal and physical perfection on Johnny Carson's stage for so long, that mainstream Hollywood directors and casting agents completely lost the ability to see him as an actual actor. Later in his life, Brooks, who possessed a deep, powerful dramatic acting range, tried desperately to audition for serious, non-comedic roles in major Hollywood films and television dramas. But the moment he walked into the casting room, the executives couldn't see the sober, dedicated actor standing before them. All they could see was the rumpled, slurring comedian who had stumbled onto Johnny Carson's couch for a decade. They would openly ask him to do the drunk voice during serious dramatic readings. Brooks was permanently trapped, professionally isolated, and artistically confined by the very brilliant illusion that had originally saved his family from poverty. He had built a character so believable that the world refused to let him be anyone else. The enduring legacy. Today, as the decades have marched on, the lights have permanently gone down on that era. All the primary, titanic figures who defined this legendary chapter of entertainment history, Johnny Carson, Foster Brooks, Dean Martin, and Ed McMahon, have passed away, leaving behind a bygone world. The smoke-filled, unscripted studio environments of 1970s Burbank are gone forever, replaced in the modern media landscape by highly scripted, heavily pre-approved, corporate-sanctioned modern late-night television formats where every single joke is focus-tested and every guest's answers are written out by a team of publicists days in advance. Yet, despite the passage of time, a fascinating, highly unexpected digital phenomenon is occurring right now across the global internet. If you open any digital video archive, explore modern streaming platforms, or look at classic television preservation channels on YouTube, you will find that archival clips of these specific Johnny Carson drunk routines regularly pull millions upon millions of views worldwide from a global audience. An entirely new generation of young viewers, many of whom were not even alive when Johnny Carson walked off his set for the last time in 1992, are finding themselves completely transfixed by these old clips. They are sharing them across social media, leaving thousands of comments, and analyzing the footage with intense fascination. Why do these old performances remain so incredibly enduring in the digital age? The answer is simple. Because they represent the absolute, unmatched pinnacle of a live comedic art form that has completely vanished from the face of the earth. These moments serve as a powerful reminder of a unique, irreplaceable chapter in American cultural history, a time when the delicate line between manufactured performance and unscripted reality was walked by master showmen like a high-wire tightrope over a stadium crowd. They show us a legendary, grounded host who possessed the unique genius to manage, protect, and elevate the most chaotic rooms in show business, and a group of brilliant, deeply disciplined performers who understood the ultimate secret of entertainment, that the true magic that kept millions of people laughing through the night was never actually found inside the liquor glass itself, but in the timeless, invisible, and unforgettable genius of the performance. The stage lights have faded on the golden age of the comedy lush, but the echoes of the laughter coming from Johnny's couch will stay with us forever.